For today's video, we are back on Tier Maker, but we're not doing the usual just ranking former top draft picks. In today's video, I'm going to be ranking NHL teams on where I think they are right now as a team from what we've saw so far the first couple of weeks of the NHL season. If they are a contender, a playoff team, a playoff bubble team, so a team kind of like the Dallas Stars and the Montreal Canadiens last year who were really close on making it, and then obviously Montreal who was really close but eventually fell short. And then I have competitive, so those are teams that you don't really expect to make the playoffs, but they are a competitive team. And then you have the draft lottery, and that is for, you know, the worst teams in the NHL and the teams that are kind of just hoping that their young players develop this year and that they can eventually get a top draft pick next summer. So let's get right into this video, starting the video off with the Colorado Avalanche, and I think they are contenders for sure. They got off to a really good start to the season. They have slipped a little bit in their last couple of games, but they are dealing with a lot of injuries to guys like Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, and that's 2/3 of one of the best lines in the NHL, so obviously the team is going to feel that loss, but I think when they are healthy and when they are on their game, they are 100% one of the best teams in the NHL, and for sure I think they are contenders. That is when they are 100% healthy. Next up we have the St. Louis Blues, and I'm going to put them as contenders. They're 9-3-3, first place in the Central Division right now with 21 points through their first 15 games, and they just won the Stanley Cup last year, so I see no reason why we should not look at this team like they are contenders. Again, they have a lot of guys having a lot of individual success as well. Ryan O'Reilly is over a point per game through the first 15 games. Braden Shen has 10 goals already in 15 games. He's gotten off to a great start. Jordan Binnington is playing well, and things are just going really well for the St. Louis Blues. So first two teams, I have them both as contenders. And next up we have the Boston Bruins, and yet again, I think I'm going to have to put them up here as contenders. They have just looked so dominant to start the season. Only one regulation loss so far on the season, and that is the least amount out of any team in the league. Even though Washington is first place in the entire league, Boston has the least amount of regulation losses out of anybody. They're first in the Atlantic with a 10-1-2 record. David Pastrnak is looking like he could be a candidate for the Hart Trophy. He's gotten off to an amazing start to the season. If they can stay healthy, I definitely see no reason why they shouldn't win this Atlantic Division and be a team that is definitely going to be dangerous come playoff time. Now moving along, we have the Montreal Canadiens. And this is kind of a difficult one. I think I'm going to put them on the playoff bubble. They're a team that heading into the year I kind of thought would have a similar year to what they did last year. And so far, that's kind of looking like what's going to happen. They have a 7-5-2 record, 16 points, 5th in the Atlantic Division. They are currently 1 point out of the second wildcard spot behind Toronto. But obviously, it's still very early in the season and people don't really look at who's in playoff spots right now. But as the months go on, these teams want to start picking up points. You want to be in the playoffs and not be on the outside looking in. So for Montreal, it's been a decent start to the year. They are having some players having some individual success, guys like Jonathan Drouin, who I mentioned in a couple of videos on the channel so far. But yeah, I think I'm going to put Montreal on the playoff bubble, but wouldn't be surprised if they make the playoffs, and also wouldn't be surprised if they miss. So that's kind of what the definition of playoff bubble is. Moving on, we have the Carolina Hurricanes, and I'm going to put them in playoffs. I don't quite think they are 100% contenders, but they are definitely a team that I wouldn't want to play in the playoffs because of how good they are defensively. That decor is amazing, and the new faces, guys like Ryan Dzingel and Eric Howler, are playing well. Andrei Svechnikov has taken a big leap in his sophomore season. They've gotten off to a great start with a 9-4-1 record, so I definitely think they are a lock for the playoffs, but I'm not quite sure if I believe they are true contenders just yet and up there with the likes of Colorado, St. Louis, and Boston. Moving on, we have the Vancouver Canucks. Now, this is one of the more difficult ones. A 9-3-2 record, 20 points through the first 14 games of the season, second in the Pacific Division. And honestly, I don't really know where I want to put them. I know they are off to a really, really good start to the season, and things are looking fantastic. But I don't quite know if I think they are 100% a lock to make the playoffs, because I feel like Calgary is only going to get better as the season goes on. Vegas as well, and I'm not quite sure if San Jose is going to, turn their season around and try to climb back up the Pacific standings. I'm going to put the Vancouver Canucks on playoff bubble for now, but I definitely am leaning towards them making the playoffs a lot more than I am them missing the playoffs. But again, it is a very long season. They could go on a massive cold stretch, and the Pacific Division is kind of a dogfight right now, placing places 6-1, so I'm not quite sure how things are going to turn out there, but Vancouver, things are looking fantastic right now. Next up, we have the Washington Capitals, and this is yet another team that I am going to put as a contender. They are currently first place in the entire NHL with 25 points through the first 16 games of the season. Things are looking fantastic. Jacob Vrana is scoring at a really good rate. Obviously, Alex Ovechkin is, and that is to be expected. And John Carlson has been an amazing defenseman and is the early season pick for the Norris Trophy. He's putting up ridiculous numbers. I think Washington is in for a big regular season and could definitely be a team that does a lot of damage in the playoffs. I know I did see a lot of people picking them to actually win the Stanley Cup, and so far that is actually looking like a pretty solid pick. Now moving along, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I'm going to put them in the competitive tier. I don't think they're one of the worst teams in the NHL, but I can't really see them making the playoffs either. I wouldn't really put them in a tier with Montreal and Vancouver. They currently have a 5-6-3 record, 13 points through the first 14 games of the season, and this is kind of what a lot of people expect. They still have a solid team, but losing guys like Bobrovsky, Duchesne, and Panarin, you're going to feel that loss, and so far through the first couple of weeks of the season, they definitely have, but they still are a competitive team. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils, and New Jersey, I'm going to put them at competitive as well. I know they're currently last place in the Metro with a 3-5-4 record for only 10 points, but they haven't played near as many games as a lot of other teams in the NHL, and they are slowly starting to turn it around. Jack Hughes has started to hit his stride, which is definitely a very good sign. Sami Vatanen is playing very well, and they just picked up Louis Domingue. Hopefully maybe he can come in and provide some life in the net there because they definitely need it, but I don't think they're one of the worst teams in the NHL. I definitely think I would consider them a competitive team. Next up, we have the Anaheim Ducks, and they're yet another team I'm going to put at the playoff bubble spot. They're currently 9-6-1, 19 points the first 16 games, third in the Pacific Division, and they're a team that I wouldn't be surprised if they keep this up and they eventually do make the playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised if a team like Arizona passes over them or Calgary, and then Anaheim eventually falls out and misses the playoffs. So that's why I'm going to put them in the playoff bubble spot. Ryan Miller and John Gibson have looked like an amazing tandem to start the season. Rickard Rakell is playing great, and overall this team is just looking very solid to start the year, and I'm definitely pretty sure that they are a playoff bubble team for me right now. Next up, we have the Calgary Flames, and this is a tough one. They literally just won the Western Conference regular season last year. They finished as the 1 seed, got bumped in the first round of the playoffs, and so far they haven't really looked like the same team as last season, so I'm actually going to put them in the playoff bubble spot, but I would not be surprised whatsoever if they go on a tear for like a month stretch and get into the top 3 seed in the Pacific Division, and then at that point I would probably move them up, but so far I haven't really saw anything from them that jumps out at me and screams that they are a lock for the playoffs, so I'm going to put them at playoff bubble, but they're another team that I'm probably leaning towards them making the playoffs more than I am them missing the playoffs. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Flyers, and this is a difficult one. They have a 6-5-2 record for 14 points, and this is a team that on paper I'm a big fan of. They have a lot of very talented players. I feel like they have a really deep crop of offensive guys, but in net, it hasn't been the greatest so far this season. Carter Hart has struggled a little bit, but I'm sure as the season goes on, he's only going to get more comfortable and play better. I'm going to put them in playoff bubble for now, but they're a team that I'm probably leaning more towards them missing the playoffs than making, as opposed to like Calgary and Vancouver, where I think they're probably going to make it more than I would say they're going to miss it. So again, I might change this up and revise it a little bit once I'm finished ranking all these teams, but for right now, I'm going to put Philadelphia at playoff bubble. The Chicago Blackhawks, I'm going to put them at competitive. Kind of a disappointing start to the season for them. Patty Kane and Jonathan Toews really aren't playing like they should. I know Patrick Kane's numbers are there, but it really just doesn't seem like he has that spark under him that he did last season where he had like 110 points. So things aren't going the greatest for Chicago, but they have a lot of talent on that team, and I 100% think they are competitive. Next up, we have the New York Islanders, and I'm going to say they're a lock for the playoffs. They have a 10-3 record, 20 points. They're on a ridiculous winning streak right now, and a team that I doubted heading into the year. I didn't like how they swapped out Lehner for Varlamov, but Greiss and Varlamov have been fantastic as a tandem to start the season, and this New York team just continues to prove me wrong. I didn't believe in them last season, and I guess I'm kind of buying in now, and I definitely think they will make the playoffs, even if they play a similar game to what they are right now and, stretch that out through the entire regular season. Next up, we have the Winnipeg Jets, and this is a difficult one. I'm going to put them at playoff bubble. Currently have an 8-7-0 record, 16 points for the first 15 games of the season, 4th in the Central Division. A team like Dallas is closing in on them, and Chicago could get hot and pass them as well, but I definitely think Winnipeg will probably finish in that 3 to 4 spot in the Central, most likely in that 4 spot, and be a team that is like battling for a wildcard spot come the end of the year. So definitely would consider them a playoff bubble team. And now we have the Los Angeles Kings, and this one is kind of difficult for me because so far early on in the season they've been relatively competitive, but I can't really see that lasting, and I definitely think they would benefit more from having a really high draft pick than they would from just missing out on a playoff spot from a couple of points. So I'm definitely going to put them in the draft lottery spot. Now moving on to the Vegas Golden Knights, I'm going to put them in the playoff spot. They have gotten off to a little bit of an inconsistent start to the season, but looking at this team on paper, they are very good, and I definitely think as the season goes on and this team gets 100% healthy, then they should be a lock for the playoffs. They have an 8-5-2 record for 18 points. Obviously in that Pacific Division that is very tough right now. They hold the number 4 spot, and I definitely think they will continue to be a playoff team for the entire year. Moving on to the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm going to put them in the same tier, 100% a playoff team. I know it's been a little bit of a shaky start. They have a 7-5-3 record, currently 4th in the Atlantic Division, but I can't really see any team other than Tampa Bay passing over them in the Atlantic, and even Tampa Bay, like, signs aren't really pointing towards them turning around just yet. So Toronto, I definitely think will be a playoff team. Tampa Bay, going to put them in the same category. I know they're currently not in a playoff spot. They're 6th in the Atlantic Division with a 6-5-2 record. A very disappointing start considering what they did last year, but I definitely think they will eventually hit their stride, and I can't really see a scenario with a team that has that much talent and had so much success last year just misses out on the playoffs. So I definitely think they will turn it around. And now the Edmonton Oilers, and I'm going to put them in playoffs as well. I wouldn't really consider them contenders, but they are the 1 seed in the Pacific right now with a 10-4-1 record. But I just don't know if I trust them as much as I trust the 4 teams that I have up in the contender tier right now. Obviously, Edmonton, a very surprising team, and it's nice to see them finally having some more success in the McDavid era. Draisaitl and him are just ridiculous, and obviously James Neal's scoring is a big help. And they've been a really fun team to watch to start the season. Hopefully they can continue that for the whole year. Next up, we have the Florida Panthers. Florida is a really difficult team to predict right now. They're currently 7-3-4, 18 points for the first 14 games, 3rd in the Pacific, or not 3rd in the Pacific, 3rd in the Atlantic Division, and I think they will continue to do that, and I do eventually think they will make the playoffs, so I am going to put them there, but I also have a lot of teams in these playoff spots and contender spots right now, and that's what makes the NHL so hard to predict, because some teams will have a surprising year out of nowhere, and then teams that everybody thought would be good kind of have a disappointing year. That happens basically every season. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I'm going to put them in the playoff bubble spot. They have an 8-5-1 record, but I think this team does need to stay healthy if they do eventually want to make the playoffs and get anything done when they get there. Obviously, they have been dealing with the injuries pretty well. You have guys stepping up, and obviously Sidney Crosby playing like the best player in the world, but I'm not quite sure if that's going to be sustainable over the course of a full 82-game season if they don't get healthy. So that's the only reason why I have them in the playoff bubble spot. The Nashville Predators, I'm going to put them up in the contender tier. They just look really good to start the season, 8-4-2, and I feel like they have a vibe to them where they're like, okay, we're just going to kind of coast through the regular season. We know we're going to make the playoffs, but once the playoffs come around, that is time where we actually want to turn it on and get things going and make a run at the Stanley Cup. Pekka Rinne is playing fantastic. I really like how Matt Duchene's playing there, and their defense, obviously everybody knows how good that D-core is, and I feel like once the playoffs hit, this is a team that I would not want to match up with, and I know they don't even have as good of a record as the Edmonton Oilers, but I just really trust them more, as Edmonton is kind of a surprising team when Nashville, we knew they were going to be good, and obviously they have gotten off to a good start to the season. The New York Rangers, I'm going to put them in the competitive tier as well, a team that had a lot of expectations coming into the year with the big offseason that they had, but so far, it's just been an okay start with a 5-5-1 record. Panarin has looked great. Kaapo Kakko, not so great, but hopefully as the season goes on, he only continues to get better. But yeah, I wouldn't put them down here. Wouldn't really consider them a playoff bubble team as well, so I think I'm just going to put them in competitive for now. Next up, we have the Buffalo Sabres, and this is kind of a difficult one for me because last year we saw this where they got off to a great start, were one of the best teams in the league early on in the season, and then they kind of fizzled off. I'm going to put them in the playoff bubble because I would not be surprised if things start to turn for the worse there and maybe they go on a little bit of a skid, and then you see teams like Tampa Bay pass them, Florida and Toronto, and then eventually you're out of the playoffs. So I definitely think that could happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if they stay good and make the playoffs as well. So that's why I'm going to put them in the bubble tier. The Ottawa Senators, obviously, I think they are a draft lottery team, and the best thing that could happen for them is if they get a top 2 pick. Not really anything else to say about that except you just want their young players to develop over the course of the season. The San Jose Sharks. This is tough. I'm not going to put them in draft lottery because there's too much talent on this team. I'm going to put them in competitive. I'm not even going to put them in playoff bubble, even though I think they will turn it around and be fighting for a spot come season's end. But things just really look awful for San Jose right now. They're a boring team to watch. Their young players aren't producing. Guys like Timo Meier and Kevin LeBanc and Thomas Hertl. I'm not quite sure what has to give for them to turn it around, but it's been an awful start to the year. The Dallas Stars, they're another team I'm going to put in the competitive tier as well. Another team that haven't gotten off to a good start. They're 7-8-1, 15 points for the first 16 games of the season. I'm kind of teetering in between because I wouldn't be surprised if they do squeak into the playoffs, and again, I wouldn't be surprised if they miss. So I'm going to put them at competitive for right now, but I might change it up a little bit later. The Minnesota Wild, I think draft lottery. I think they should be heading in a full rebuilding direction. And the one awful thing about them is they're not winning games, and their young players aren't producing. Like, it would be different if they weren't winning, but guys like Ryan Donato, Joel Eriksson-Ek, all those guys, Kevin Fiala were playing really well, but they're not. That's not the case, and Brad Hunt is like their second leading scorer, so that's not a good sign for them. My Detroit Red Wings, I'm going to put us in the draft lottery tier as well. I think the 4 worst teams in the NHL are the 4 worst teams you see in this tier right now. I think Detroit on some nights can be competitive. You know, obviously started the season pretty well, 3-1. But for the most part, I think it would benefit us more so getting a high draft pick than it would missing out on the playoffs by a couple of points. So I don't mind that we're one of the worst teams in the NHL again. And now finishing out with the Arizona Coyotes. They're currently 8-4-1 with 17 points, but they're 6th in the Pacific. That just shows you how good that Pacific division is, and I'm going to put them in the playoff bubble as well because I just don't really know. That Pacific is really hard to predict right now. So I'm going to look over this, see if I want to change anything up, and I'll be right back. So I think I am going to keep it like this, not make any changes. I'm pretty confident in who I have up there as the contenders, and same goes for the playoff teams. If your favorite team is not ranked where you would have liked, you don't have to go hating. Just let me know in the comment section what you disagree with and what your list would look like. So that is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope you guys did enjoy. Like I said, make sure to let me know down in the comment section below, where do you think you would rank your favorite team right now? And with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you did enjoy, please make sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel for daily NHL content, and I will see you guys all in the next video.